Today is a truly special day in the life of our community. We are going to dedicate our medicine wheel garden outside. And as part of that planning, we thought it would be appropriate to invite people from the indigenous community, leaders, to share that experience with us. And we got yeses from 2 people, the 2 we asked. So I am so grateful. We are honored to welcome today the chief of the QayQayt First Nation, Chief Rhonda Larrabee, to Unity of New Westminster. Now, those of you who are part of our community know that every week for the past several years, we've been acknowledging the land that we are here on as guests. And so you're familiar with the word QayQayt. Tragically, it's not a word that is all that well recognized. In 1859, the people of QayQayt were moved from their village along Front Street here in New Westminster to other areas, which included the New Westminster Indian Reserve. And in 1916, the reserve was closed, and the people dispersed. Some went to other nations, and others just dispersed. And the story of the QayQayt was almost forgotten. The reserve was deemed inactive in 1951. And Chief Larrabee discovered that she was of QayQayt descent and applied for Indian status in 1994. She resurrected the band, became chief, because we need to have a chief. And today she works to keep the legacy of her ancestors alive. Her story is captured in the award-winning National Film Board of Canada documentary, A Tribe of One. It is very moving. Beautiful, beautiful story. And in the interest of keeping transitions smooth, I will introduce a little bit about Chief Robert Joseph now, and then the 2 chiefs will take it from there. We're honored to welcome Chief Robert Joseph to Unity of New Westminster. Chief Joseph is a hereditary chief of the Gwawaenuk people. He is the Ambassador for Reconciliation Canada, chair of the Native American Leadership Alliance for Peace and Reconciliation. Chief Joseph is a former member of the National Assembly of First Nations Elders Council. He was also formerly the executive director of the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, and is an honorary witness to Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He is also the author of an award-winning book called Namwayut, A Path to Reconciliation. And the line at the top of the book here is, "We are all one." And how I came to meet Chief Joseph is at a writers' conference in Whistler last year, where you were accepting an award, I believe. And my sister was attending the conference, and it was the opening evening, and the keynote was about to begin, and I was driving up later to arrive later, and Jill was chatting with Farrell, with Chief Joseph's son, and had seen the name of the book. And she texted me and said, "Get here now." And so I had the privilege of listening to Chief Joseph and his wisdom and his experience. And I am delighted that you are here. So thank you. So now, to officially welcome and to share some of her own words, we ask Chief Rhonda Larrabee to join us. And you need a microphone.
Hello? Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and very distinguished guests sitting here in the front row. Hosiem, Hosiem. As you heard, my name is Rhonda Larrabee, and I am chief of the QayQayt First Nation because no one else wanted to do it. So I have 3 brothers, Ron, Rod, and Rob. I have 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. And for the last 30 years, we have been providing and spreading our story throughout this community. And when we first started, people could not say QayQayt. They were like, how do you say that? Is it QayQayt? Is it... They just couldn't say it. And now it just rolls off everyone's tongues because you become familiar with it. My ancestors, George Joseph, his wife Ida Charlie, who became Ida Joseph, were my grandparents. My great-grandparents, George Joseph and Sophie Pierre, who became Sophie Joseph, and a great-uncle, great-great-uncle, Francis Joseph, are all buried at St. Peter's Cemetery because they are from New Westminster and have always lived here. So when our reserves were shut down, my mom and her siblings were taken to the Kamloops Indian Residential School, where they spent, depending on their ages, up to 7 years. So when Mom was released from there, she was taught not to admit that she was an Aboriginal woman, that it was shameful. So until the day she passed away, she never told a soul. She told me her story. She told me not to tell my brothers. She told me not to tell my daughters or mention it to anybody. But when she passed, my connection to her was gone, and I wanted to find her family. And my dad said, do it. He said, go find her family, find out who she was, and make her proud that she was indeed an Aboriginal woman from New Westminster who lived on the riverbanks, who learned how to swim in the Fraser River because her brother threw her in the water and she had to sink or swim. She did tell us funny stories about her life living in New Westminster, but she never admitted ever that she lived on the reserve. And so QayQayt First Nation became extinct, almost. And it was actually the other First Nations in the province who said to me, you can't let that happen. And so for the last more than 30 years, we have been working with the federal government so that they will recognize who we are. The provincial government and the municipal government. And I think they're all on board. So hopefully we will be able to come home. My elder who was a distant cousin of my mom from Stalo Nation, did a ceremony for me and named me Zaiwamat in honor of my late great-grandfather from Stalo Nation. And I carry that name proudly because I am proud. I'm proud to be an Indigenous woman. I'm proud to tell you our story. And Mom, I hope you're proud too. Were any of you at Indigenous Day on Friday? At Moody Park? What a busy, busy day. We have so much to offer. Our songs, our drumming, our dancing. The Métis community we have a close connection with, and there were some Métis dancers there, which we were very proud of, and have a close connection to the North Fraser Métis Association, with many in the community, and I hope it continues. I'm so happy to be here today on behalf of Reconciliation to have you dedicate a medicine wheel garden. Is absolutely amazing because reconciliation means action, and this congregation has done that. So thank you so much. I raise my hands to you. I guess that's all I have to say. I enjoyed the songs. Thank you so much, you two. That was beautiful. And of course, I can't wait to hear Dr. Robert Joseph. So thank you for listening. Haichka Siyam. I would like to call upon my brother, Chief Robert Joseph, to come up here now. You. We are all one, so you're my brother. It's
on. There. That's good. Thank you. That's such a moving story. I can't imagine why we would have done things like that when the first newcomers came to this country. I've spent all my life trying to figure out how people can be so mean to each other. We don't need to be mean to each other. And every once in a while in the course of my lifetime, I find a moment of inspiration somewhere in a time and place where I'm reminded that I belong, that we all belong. And it's during those times that I'm inspired to want to do something about our oblivion to love for each other. I've been working on reconciliation issues for 3.5 decades now. I was part of all of the groups in Ottawa and everywhere else who spoke about it and advocated for it fiercely, really, really hard. Because somehow those of us who were sitting around those tables knew that the way forward had to be one that was inclusive, that we're all interconnected, and that somehow we had to find a way to love each other. So you know what? Reconciliation really means love. And if we reconcile, if we're talking about reconciliation, we ask, where do we start? And of course, my answer always is that you start with you. Start with self. It starts nowhere else. Because if you don't love yourself, how can you love others? And then I finally, in the course of this work, discovered I could love me. I was so full of self-loathing, lack of sense of value, not knowing what love really was, yet yearning for it so deeply in my soul I could feel it, and I didn't know how to respond to it. And I think when we talk about reconciliation in general, before we talk about reconciliation with newcomers and indigenous people, we have to think about reconciliation from our own perspective. What does it mean to me? Because that's where it will start. And it's such a powerful force to begin to believe in yourself. And if you believe in yourself, there's no obstacle to believing in others. And maybe we can learn to believe in each other, that everybody matters, that everybody should be cared for and loved, and that we will all be holding each other up. I come from the North Vancouver Island area where QayQayt, that's our tribal group name. Here we have the Coast Salish, and they have this really simple gesture. They always hold their hands up, both hands, to anybody they meet. And it's such a welcoming, inclusive gesture that's so important in the mass development of humanity. So if maybe this is one of the exercises you should bring home with you today, hold your hands up for others, to others, whenever you meet, whenever you get the chance to give expression to whatever degree of your love and care for your fellow human beings. I've been around since the beginning of the reconciliation movement. I was honored to be a part of a lot of the design and negotiations with our politicians and the federal government and the churches. And I want to tell you, it's probably the best idea, the very best idea that has ever come to be in this great country of ours. That we can say the word reconciliation. Can you say the word? Reconciliation. And then think about what that means. Think about what it means for you personally, individually, for your family, for your community. Think about it, what it means. Because there's a movement in this country that's going on and underway now since the release of the Truth and Reconciliation over a decade ago. And I can tell you that this country will never be the same again. We're better already. We've got a long, long ways to go, but we're better already. But we need each other. People with open hearts, and open minds, the willingness to reach out to others. You know, another thing I want you to learn how to do, in passing, when you're meeting people, maybe you're at a social gathering, maybe it's in a beautiful sacred church, look each other in the eye and acknowledge your humanity. When you look the right way into each other's eyes, it's a look of value and of love unexpressed, because we're not used to talking about love in everyday ways. So when I think about reconciliation, I think the really important step to take is to find out, how does it apply to me personally, meaning you personally? What do I do from this day forth? How do I move forward? I know this for sure now. I just was thinking about it this morning, that reconciliation can't happen without love. We could move mountains, we could negotiate political manifestos or whatever they are, but if we don't love, nothing will change. We see each other in the same way that we've always seen each other. I think that here in Canada we can be a model to the world about what human beings can do in the countries that they live and work and play and love so much. If we open our hearts and minds again, like I said, to the idea of reconciliation. I spent 11 years in a school right in my backyard where I come from, where I was born, where my ancestors were born. And I remember the first day I got there, I'd never seen a 3-story building. And I was so confused. And when I was dropped off and my mother left, she didn't turn around, she didn't say goodbye, and she left. And I was so afraid. I don't know, that was the moment I discovered real fear in my life. And then I became so lonely, I became isolated. I didn't know what the language was that they were speaking in that institution. I had never eaten the foods that they were serving. It was so foreign. But the worst thing about it all was the treatment they gave little boys and girls who, through no fault of their own, became students in those residences. I've never in my life ever again felt denigrated, embarrassed, humiliated, hurt, shamed. Those were real things that happened to real little kids. And you grow up in that for a decade or more, you leave absolutely broken, absolutely hopeless, absolutely alone. So I finally left there. I remember the last time I stood on the top of the steps of that big building, and I was looking out toward the ocean, and it struck me that I had nowhere to go. I had learned absolutely nothing in that school other than my worthlessness. And from there, it just spiraled down. I began to drink lots. I began to drink too much. I always wanted to get married real quick, have lots of children, because they'd be mine. I'd never be lonely again, right? So that's what I did. I had 5 children. One of my sons is here, Farrell. I didn't know, nobody told me what it takes to be married, what you should do, or anything about it. And over time, the marriage deteriorated very quickly. And suddenly, I was alone in this huge big house that we owned in Cam River. And I totally spiraled out of control. And if you ever live without hope, it's so painful. And so I found myself in a position. You know what the good news is? There's always something ahead where there's a possibility to take a little step or a giant step or a miracle step. And thank God I had this miracle step. I had a vision. I really want to tell you about this vision. And it reminded me when this was on earlier, and you saw the galaxy and the heavens and everything. Well, I had been drinking too much, and a friend of mine told me as I met him on the street in Cam River, hey, he said, everybody calls me Bobby Joe. Bobby Joe, you gotta get out of town. Come fishing with me for a day. And I said, of course I'll come. I knew how much trouble I was in, right? So he said, well, go down to the boat and sleep it off. You know where it's tied up. You fished with me before. So I didn't remember going. I woke up the next morning, of all things, and I woke up, and as soon as I woke up, I could smell the booze. I hope none of you ever been there. When you've drank so much, you can smell the booze. And the hopelessness and the darkness. And I opened my eyes, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on this seine boat, my friend's seine boat, and I looked around, and all the crew members were still sleeping. I was so ashamed. I sneaked off the bunk, through the engine room to the galley, onto the deck of the boat, and I ran to the stern of the boat and threw myself on the boat. By that time I couldn't see. I was crying so hard. And I looked over the gunwales of the boat, and I saw the water so coral green, with so much energy and power. And then I raised my gaze and I saw the forests on Vancouver Island, and it was full of lightning and energy as well. And soon I was looking up into the heavens, and I heard this voice say to me, in spite of what you've done to yourself, I love you, and you're a part of all of this. And the rest has been kind of history. I've done so many things that I never imagined I would ever do. I've traveled this world in the name of peace to countries around the globe. I spent full time on a residential school with the Assembly of First Nations, our politicians and church leaders and others, negotiating a settlement agreement. Advocated really hard for the Prime Minister apology and the Pope's apology, and just a whole lot of things. And I still look back and I think, well, you know what? Maybe that was meant to be. Maybe I was chosen to go through all of that harm and hurt and darkness and brokenness and despair, and find myself in one of the most lovely processes this country has ever gone through. The idea that we are all one. So I look back at it all now, and I have absolutely no bitterness. I love you more than I loved you before. I love me more than I ever loved myself. I guess the main point I'm making right now is that reconciliation begins with you. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. You can inspire yourself to the heaven, or walk away and never think about it again. But we'd all be the less if you did the latter. We belong to each other. We're all human beings, and we need each other. We need to think about how we can be more inclusive, how we can be more loving, and how we can celebrate each other. So this country, there are a number of instruments that we can use if you choose today to get serious about following the path of reconciliation. There are a number of things that have taken place in the country. The first one, of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It has 94 calls to action. And that's really important. And someday we're going to meet many of those calls to action. But we're going to deepen that and broaden that, and we're going to call to action you and I and every Canadian in this country to learn to be one, to be Namwayut with each other. We are all one. And so the country, so the future really looks bright. I don't know if you see it with me, but I can see it, that we're going to be better. We're going to be all better for it. So that was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We have also the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report with all of its recommendations. And there are other really important documents that can help us lead the way. But just here, what do we do? Maybe catch the flame, the spark, and bring it forth beyond this beautiful door today and bring it home with us. What do? Well, you might think about starting to create, just out of the blue, even if you don't know much yet, creating a reconciliation action plan for yourselves. Tonight, before you fall asleep, or you go to bed, think about it. You got a piece of paper there, and you're saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to see where this idea brings me, this idea of reconciliation. So you make your own reconciliation action plan. Everybody can do that. There's no right or wrong. Reconciliation is not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of doing better, and if you take this step and it helps you to do better, then it's probably more right than wrong, right? And so I really want you to think about that. Sometimes the example I give is, you know, you've been walking to work every day, your employer is close by, the office is close by, and you've been walking by this corner where this homeless man has been for weeks and weeks, and he's always got his head down or he's hunched over, and you don't know what to do, but you don't even know how you feel for sure, and you walk by him every morning. Well, maybe your first reconciliation action plan might be to say, tomorrow when I see that homeless person, I'm going to look her or him in the eye and just give a nod. Maybe that's all we need sometimes, just give a nod, and somebody might live. Somebody might find a spark of hope. Somebody might say, I do have some value. I am loved. And those are the sort of personal things that we ought to think about when you talk about reconciliation. But the idea that we don't know each other, Indigenous people and all other Canadians, we don't know each other enough. We don't talk to each other. We live in different orbits. We should try to break that and begin to have relationships with each other where we live or work or play. And we sit down and we have dialogue. You know what happens when we begin to talk to each other a little more and more and more and more? Understanding creeps in. And soon that manifests, transforms into action. There's not a person in this room who cannot be involved in reconciliation if you so choose. And if you think your lives are perfect right now, that's good. I'm happy for everyone in this room who thinks their lives are perfect now. Just asking you to take a little step forward, a little further, farther, whatever, and think about people less fortunate, people who need more love in our lives, people who need to be acknowledged more in our lives. And that's how we grow reconciliation. And then, of course, if you take the reconciliation, Truth and Reconciliation report, there are all those 94 calls to action. We have everything at our fingertips to give us direction about where we want to go with this thing called reconciliation. You know, and I walked in here today. Well, first of all, I walked by the garden. I thought, oh my gosh, That's so beautiful. It represents some ideas and feelings of the people who belong to this wonderful structure about each other, and for others they don't know. This garden's gonna help change that. It's gonna help change us in this room. And I was so glad I was here. And I thought, you know what, this place, it's sacred. And we have to learn to acknowledge sanctity or sacredness. Whether you're in a church or not, you might be in a cathedral grove in the forest or somewhere else by a riverside. We've lost the idea of sanctity. And we should be trying to rebuild that idea around everything that we do and say. And those are all elements of reconciliation, of course. I think maybe you're getting the idea that there isn't anybody here who can't think about what you might do to make this world a better place for you, for your family, for everybody else. That's how open our hearts and minds should be. So when I got here, I was so moved. I almost didn't get here, but that's a story, story of its own, right? And I'm so glad I got here. You know? So in kind of closing now, I just want to say that reconciliation in this country is underway. Our brilliant leaders and scholars haven't found a way yet to quantify that, to be able to report back to us about what's happening across the country with unions and companies and everybody, all segments of society. A whole lot of people outside of this room are making efforts at reconciliation from whatever level they're starting from, and it's all legit. You pick a starting line and go. It's legit. Over time, you'll discover the final pathway that you choose. And it truly is going to transform this country that's already under transformation. Walas ikan nochai. My spirit is so lifted. For what we're doing here today, for talking about what we're talking about. So I know that all of you are really decent people as well. We have to find that decency in all of us, acknowledge it, harness it. And there isn't anyone in this room who doesn't have a degree of decency. And I want to thank the organizers for inviting me today and for creating that garden outside, and for you for showing up. You know, when I'm going to close with this. At the very front end of the reconciliation process, the commission had traveled around the country already. They were coming to Vancouver, and I was so afraid that we in Vancouver would not attend, that no one would come to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings. So it happened that I wasn't well. I had just got out of the hospital. Oh no, it was before that. Before I got out of the hospital, I had a colon cancer operation. And I called my daughter, my oldest daughter, to come and see me. She said, of course, I'll come right away. And I said, I want you, first of all, I said, you know, cancer is a really scary thing. We never know for sure what's going to happen. But I want you to promise me something. She said, yes, I'll promise you that. What is that? I said, I want you to promise you're going to hold the biggest walk ever for reconciliation. Done, she said. So anyway, I was discharged 2 or 3 days later, and in a room in my kitchen, she and a really brilliant accountant started to put together a plan to have a big walk for reconciliation so that we might entice a lot of British Columbians to come to the walk. And so it happened. We set the date for the walk. We organized. Guess who were our strongest allies? I don't know if it was my brilliance or somebody's brilliance. Somebody else's brilliance. But we said, why don't we get the faith-based groups to help us? So we convened a meeting of faith-based groups. They all came. Big religions, little religions, whatever religions. And they were all in. They told their congregation, this Sunday, don't come to church, go to that walk in lieu of coming to church. And so we had this first walk for reconciliation. 70,000 people showed up. Yeah. In the pouring rain, there were a sea of umbrellas everywhere. And my knees were like this. And I cried. We got to have faith in each other. So when we leave today and you go on your ways to your life courses, have faith in yourself, have faith in others, have faith in the Creator. I did a lot of praying then as well. See, we're more than we think we are. And when we're together and we're collective and we're committed to each other and we love each other, it's so way more. It's a good way to be. I really want to thank all of you. It just moves me a lot to be here today, to see. One time in my life, nobody listened to me. You know? So I wrote a book. It's called Namwayut. And people are reading the book. People are listening to me once in a while. And I think to myself, what a blessing, the privilege to be a part of our journey. Wherever it goes, it's our journey. And there will be more invested, others less. But even if we just raised or heightened or deepened the degree of love between us all, then it's been worth it. Thank you all for listening. We can have a question or two? Yeah. I'm going to take a guess, and then I try to respond the best way I can, right? And it always works. We somehow have a connection because of your question and my response and my effort, right? And the only thing I really heard was defining moment. But other than that, I felt what you were saying was critically important, and I hope everybody heard those words. I'm going to talk about the defining moment for me. It's the most defining moment in my entire life, all of my life experience. And it was a time when as I mentioned, on that fish boat, when I threw myself on the deck and I had this vision about the environment, the ocean, the trees, the heavens, and the voice telling me that I was loved. After that, I absolutely felt belonging, connection, and a sense of value, important enough that I knew then that I could love myself again. There must have been times in life before that I might have found sparks about little Bobby Joe. What a nice little guy, nice little kid, beautiful smile, etc., etc. But at that moment with that vision, turned my life around. And I have never felt unloved like I used to feel again. And so that's pretty defining. I think that just for defining moments, we all have our defining moments. They're like purpose, reason for being. We ask ourselves as we grow through life, what is my purpose? And we spend our time fearlessly and full time looking for this elusive purpose when all of the time we were living it out already. And so that our purpose, is the lifelong experience that we had. And we have moments of triumph where we say, this is my purpose. I'm great, or I'm smart, or I'm brilliant, or I'm rich. Whatever we think that purpose is, those are moments of purpose. So if you're feeling less right now, it's part of your purpose. Work through it, grow through it, and you'll be better on the other side. So I should cut it off.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of our medicine wheel, but I'd like to thank both of our chiefs for coming today, Chief Rhonda Larrabee and Chief Joseph Robert. Right? Am I right? I keep searching them around. And it's such an honor for us to be here today, and the inspiration to dedicate it to this nation of people, the QayQayt Nation, was actually something that we came up with that was because we've been acknowledging them for the last few years. So, to start off with, we had a piece of ground that we weren't able to do anything with. And the ground itself was being battered by the crows all the time. We were constantly having to reseed. And we finally thought, what should we do to make this a valuable space that we wouldn't have to deal with these issues over and over again? And I believe that Rhona had come up with the idea of doing a labyrinth. And we pondered the idea, and we talked about it, and we thought about how we could do that, and realized maybe it might be a little too small for the area. And we came up with the idea, I think it was Cliff that brought it up first, about doing a medicine wheel. And from there, I took over and started to design. And the design went through many different processes because we had to take into account wheelchair access and people with disabilities. And thank you, Barb Good, for coming up with that and letting us know where we could make it a little bit better for everyone. And so we came up with that, and we drew out the plans. We put it on the floor so everyone could have an idea and see what it would look like. We put up a sign outside so that everyone would know that we're fundraising, because we raised a lot of funds. Some of the funds that we raised came from the blanket that the quilt that I put together through a lot of denim jeans and was raffled off, and some of that money was used for that. The blanket represents to me and to the people I come from a sense of pride, destiny, and prosperity, and the warmth of all of our cultures and families together with us. So we also had a blessing and a breaking of the ground, which I did a nice little prayer for it, and we prayed amongst it, and we blessed the ground, made it sacred. We then moved on to getting it. Yeah, that's right. That's a good slide. That slide there, the one before. So we actually drew it out after we developed. Maybe we could go back to the other slide with the ground on it. Yeah, right there. That's good. So that's what it turned out to look like. We worked on it. We got the people to come in and pour in the gravel through Cindy Noble. I believe her partner came in and did it for us. He did all of the laying of the cement. And we set it all up, and we got going. Now we can move forward to the next slide. Then it was drawing it out. We had to draw it out, which was very difficult, but Cliff and I, figured out how to draw it out to set it all up. So it is now wheelchair accessible. And in the center is a fountain. The fountain represents life, and it also represents the harmony with nature, having birds that might bathe within the center of it as well too, so that it could represent messages that are brought to you while you are there. The wheel itself is not that difficult to try to figure out how to go about it. There is a video that I have done that can help you walk through the wheel, and it will be on a sign that we are still waiting to receive, that will show you exactly how you can walk the wheel if you'd like to follow it step by step. But basically, it's a place where you can find solitude, tranquility, peace, and harmony with nature. And there you can introspect and look at where your life is at and where you would like to go. Can we move on to the next slide? And there it is after we painted it. We ran into several obstacles along the way, and we've been learning as we've been going. Planted plants, people have pulled out plants. We had a homeless person set up a tent in the middle of the medicine wheel and ended up burning our bench that we installed. So we've had our challenges, but one of the biggest challenges was finding the medicines. We got the red cedar from here, of course, but we've had to have the sweetgrass shipped in, as well as Cliff and I traveled all the way to Kamloops to go and find some sage. And we harvested the sage because that's very difficult to find. And the tobacco, I usually grow it. Last year I grew it. This year I didn't have the seed, so I ordered some. So we got some at the last minute. And the other plants that we're putting in there are indigenous to this area. We want to make sure that we kept true to the place and the people. And we were fortunate enough to find a place called the Coast Salish Plant Nursery in North Vancouver, which had a lot of plants for us. As I did not know exactly where to place them all, but I left it in the hands of the Creator, because it wasn't, a medicine wheel is not typical of the area. If they were blessing and doing blessings in the area, they would use cedar boughs and branches. And sage, or smudging, I was told, is as well is not something typical of the area, but they suggest that we do sage if we do. So when we do our sage, smudging today, I will be using sage and red cedar, and you will be given the opportunity to be able to smudge and pray. So that's how we developed it, and it's been about 3 years in the making and a lot of hard work. And we also got a grant from the city of New Westminster for $5,000 to help us with it. So and we have to match that. And so it's a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of love. And so thank you all for being here today to help us with the dedication to the QayQayt Nation. So I will pass it over to Rhona now. Yeah.
The words gratitude and thank you are insufficient to identify the feelings that I am experiencing, and I'm sure others are too. It breaks my heart to think of the things that humans have done to humans in the name of religion. It breaks my heart to hear about children who are dehumanized, which has to be the worst sin or crime against humanity that I can imagine. Dehumanization of anyone for any reason is a crime against humanity, and it harms us all. And so I raise my hand to you, Chief Joseph, and I raise my hand to you, Chief Larrabee. Thank you for being here and inspiring us today, encouraging us to see beyond our past and the sins of our forebears to a place where we now can embrace each other and move forward together. Reconciliation is love. We are all one. We are all love. And what we do to one, we do to each other and to all. And so I bless you, and I am so grateful to you. Thank you for being here.